This is a potentially very significant announcement. In September 2010, the previous government decided that it was no longer able to borrow money and it withdrew from the financial markets. Within a few months, the situation had become even more serious, and as people recall, by November of 2010, the state had to be bailed out. This is the attempt on Thursday to raise money from private investors. This is the first time the government has attempted to do that in almost 2 years. This is the very first step in what will be a process over more than a year that the government will attempt to borrow more and more money so that it can wean itself off the bailout money that it gets from other EU countries and the IMF and return to the normal way governments fund themselves, and that is to borrow from private investors. I think it's almost certain they'll get the 500 million. 500 million is not a very large amount of money in the broader scheme of things compared to the size of the amount the government spends and takes in. The things to watch will be how much investor interest there is. So will there be 3 times that amount offered by private investors? Will there be just that amount offered? If it were to be the case that there was only 500 million offered by private investors, then that would be not such a good signal. So the government will be hoping, or the National Treasury Management Agency, the NTMA, will be hoping that multiples of the 500 million is offered. Everyone will be also watching very closely the interest rate that the government has to offer those investors to take up these financial instruments that it's offering. They're called treasury bills. They'll have to be paid back in just 3 months. So it's very much a very first step in the attempt by the government to raise money in the normal way. The deal was very important, and that was reflected immediately in financial markets when the yields or the effective interest rate on Irish government debt fell very, very markedly, and that's been locked in. In the past, when there's been some good news from EU summits, it's tended to have a much shorter term effect. So far, all this week, those gains that in Irish government bond yields have been maintained. So it's very clear that financial markets have viewed last Friday's decision in Brussels as being very important, and this has helped the government. Now, it was widely expected that the NTMA would attempt to raise money from private investors this month and begin that process, but it's been made much easier by that announcement last Thursday in Brussels. I think broadly speaking, the figures are positive. They're not hugely positive. It shows that government revenues are 3% ahead of government projections in the first 6 months of the year. It also shows that spending is 1% ahead. So both are running a little ahead, but it's better that revenues are running ahead, which means the deficit is being closed a little more than expected. But I think the main thing we can take from these figures is that the targets look likely to be met at the halfway point in the year, but they don't suggest anything really significant at this point. We need to see a much bigger increase in revenues before that gave an indication that the economy is picking up.